Okay, so thank you for the introduction and thanks for being here. What I wanted to talk about is how retail needs the city and city needs retail in that regard, and how technology is enabling to develop new solutions and so on in order to amplify that relationship, which is very much needed because, do not get wrong, people are the ones pressing the buy button and people are the ones actually swiping or sweeping that credit card when you are buying, right? So just as a brief introduction, we help both cities and retailers improve their relationship with the city, in that sense. So you see there, we work with cities, we work with retail operators, and we have developed as retailers improve their footfall and their presence on the city, on which is the interaction they had, right? And today we are asked by the organization to talk about 3 different lighthouses, which are very important in a global scale as a retail example. Amsterdam, London, obviously, and Barcelona. The reason for that is that each one represents a very different segment of purchasing and way of purchasing. But before we get into that, we need to talk about people, because cities, we've seen that retailers actually depend on people, right? But thing is that, and this is what Jan, John, or Joanne is for a retailer somehow. In a nutshell, they are users, they are influencers, and for technology as well. They are a technology endpoint, but they are a technology start point in the sense of they get demand and so on. They are data collectors and so on. But if you are an urban planner, that person, that Jan John, is a citizen, is a commuter as well, is a safety hazard, which is something that worries cities very much in that sense. But they are as well wealth generators, service users, and they help the city with safety, right? But what happens, the difference between planning and retail somehow is market segmentation, and that is where technology brings us together somehow. Because for an urban planner or people working with the built environment, it's not only John, it's as well Janet and Steve and Matty. But then it multiplies and continues multiplying. At the end of the day, the citizen user or the citizen customer is this gigantic array of end users that it's not that easy to somehow break down into niches because they overlap quite something. And it's very easy to see that. For instance, if anybody of you has siblings, on a retail perspective, they are Generation Z, millennials, whatever you call it. But on a city perspective, they are very much related to the parents. So they become a unit. That is the main difference between understanding that built environment, because a park is used by the parents, the grandparents, the children, the dog, and so on, whereas a store is much more segmented. Today we are going to talk a bit about those 3 different cities, okay? And the thing that those 3 different cities have, and I just want the rest of the data, don't focus that much on the small print, okay? But why are they interesting? Amsterdam has a very low store density in that regard. They've got 6.6 stores per 1,000 inhabitants. But Amsterdam is very concentrated. The stores are very much concentrated on the very city center. Something similar happens to London, but not in such a scale. They've got almost 18 stores per 1,000 inhabitants. And why is Barcelona so interesting? Because the amount of stores that there are in Barcelona skyrockets. There are 46 stores per 1,000 inhabitants in Barcelona which are active. If you include temporary retail stores and pop-up stores, that figure jumps up to 67. So, in fact, it is one of the retail densest cities that are in the world. And it has quite something to do with the layout of the city and how people live. So, all in all the 3 different cities represent a very different way of retailing, way of understanding the relationship between city, retail space, and citizen. Okay? So, but there is a problem jumping up. What you see there is actually London, and those were pictures taken 3 weeks ago within London. What you see in common there happens as well in Barcelona. Again, pictures taken 3 weeks, between 1 month and 3 weeks ago. And happens the same with Amsterdam. What all these three things have in common is called the shutter syndrome. If you ever heard of it, and this is very important both for technology, both for big data and cities, is actually that the shutter syndrome happens when on a street shops start to close down. And it's almost to get into a kind of a disease somehow, because the more shops close down, that kind of disease spreads, because they lose attractiveness for the rest of the retailers. It's very important to understand that the physical retail is something that is done by density. The denser the retail units are, the more successful those retail units are. So what can we do in order to thrust that relationship? So you remember Jan, John, those citizens, which are different but similar on very different levels. What you see there is obviously what's a value chain. Everybody knows what a value chain is, right? I mean, it's nothing really. This is a very, very shortened and condensed example of a value chain. But what we have developed in both the three cities is a perception chain. And a perception chain, as a technology tool and as a process tool, allows you to invert the processes to know which are the touch points and which is the perception of the retail services you are delivering and the retail services the city is enabling. And that allows us to know which are the most important facts for the cities. Because cities need to level the playfield or the playground for retail spaces as well and for retail technology. Because they need each other. Retail cannot exist without a city because it is where citizens live, it is where customers live. Very important. And the city cannot live without our retail, because then you got into that kind of ghost towns which are just residential. So therein lies the difference, or the need that they need. That's kind of relationship they need to keep up. And just to, as a result of the perception change, I want you to have a bit of food for thought, which is, will you feel safer on a street packed up with open shops, or will you feel safer on a street completely empty? That's something that you need to think about a bit, because that is, in a nutshell, that is the perfect image of which is the relationship you want as a citizen to have between the shops, retail, and the city where you live. So what brings the three things together? What we have to do in order to boost, or what we have found on those three different cities in order to boost that relationship. Retail is a street booster. It empowers the street, it makes the street more livable. On a technology standpoint, it increases the data amount that you can have, which is extremely interesting, not only for retailers, but for citizens as well, and hence for city halls, for city corporations. The more data they can have, the better citizen services are. And we'll go back to that on a second. It means activity, interaction and occupation for the city. It means that the city has to be a blank canvas for retail. What does that mean? It needs to allow new retail models to happen, new blended models. There is this new term of forget about online, forget about offline, get for a blended model where everybody can get, because although a store can be designed for grandparents or millennials, or you put the label on it, the street where it happens has to be designed for everybody, hence the blank canvas. the sense of community, and on a technology level, data, energy is going to be very important as well. One thing that we run a data set, we run a model, and if you think on Britain, I know that Britain is not that sunny, or United Kingdom is not that sunny, but on that technology point of view, if Tesco was about to place solar panels on each of the large Tescos, Tesco will be the second energy company on United Kingdom. And we are not even talking about real giants such as Carrefour. I mean, if you get Spain, for instance, which is a very sunny country, if Carrefour decided to place solar panels and sell that energy, they will become the first energy producer. Then you can start thinking how that falls down to the end city and how the city uses energy as well. Because you don't need energy centrals, you are actually going to use much more energy distribution. So in this case, retail technology impacts the environmental friendliness. Artificial intelligence, obviously, but what can the city make do or impulse the retail with? One of the best initiatives we have seen is the Urban Radar. An Urban Radar is an initiative placed in Barcelona which links citizens, technology, retail and city hall. What does that do? Urban Radar is a kind of emergency button that shops have, where each shop is assigned a certain amount of citizens to have a look at. Usually seniors, elderly people or handicapped people or people who have loneliness problems. What does that mean? If that person doesn't show up for 3 weeks, the shop presses that red button, so social services go there. This is the kind of interaction that cities, citizens and retail can have in order to get that community going up. So at the end of the day, still is how to increase the sales, but it is on a much more social manner, how you can actually have a positive impact on that community, because you are actually always, all the day through, checking up with your potential customer on their well-being. Guerrilla digital gardens, this is actually very, very interesting for retail as well. Can you create new environments on empty plots, on unused city spaces, so you can start boosting them up? Can you create that experience with, is powered by new technologies such as microgeneration. It allows you to get data about which is the new customer type that you are getting, but at the same time start boosting up, start recovering the city. The traveling shop and urban robotics. One of the things that we are seeing, especially in Barcelona and Amsterdam, is how retail can have, especially for food, very interesting, can have that kind of grow back in the city. So imagine that your local Sainsbury's, your local Tesco, your local Waitrose creates that kind of within unused spaces of the city, greenhouses, so that the produce is very, 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 very local as well. That is enabled for technology. So in a nutshell, what these slides want to present is that technology is not only data, there is so much that technology can do to boost retail within the city realm that it's actually quite staggering. So City for Retail, this is actually what we are working at for Amsterdam. Those are digital gardens, and those are going into empty plot spaces. Because the problem that Amsterdam has is that they don't have enough footfall on certain streets due to vacant plots. Hence the city need, what the city needs. The problem of retail is actually is reach in Amsterdam. People have to travel way too much to go to the shop. So this allows them to create new experiences, and as well the third problem they've got is weather. Can you change the weather in the Netherlands, which is not that easy, fine. So the digital gardens create actually to them a very specific weather condition, so new activities can get in. a retail constellation, can you get actually a traveling shop? A traveling shop is not something that it's not a pop-up shop. A traveling shop always has the same content, but it travels around. It's very different for a pop-up shop. A pop-up shop goes for a very concentrated need and takes advantage of that concentrated need. When that retail need disappears, then it goes another way. A traveling shop has always more or less the same content, but it goes where the demand is, where your customer is, right? And finally, one of the things that we are developing for Barcelona is, because we were able to develop a program for the city of Barcelona which actually links football with potential revenue, and this we did that in-house, of each node that they have developed. This is a renovation for the market. Actually, this golden thing that you are seeing there, the thing that technology has allowed us to do is to link a culinary university to existing food market. The reason for that, what technology allows you to do, is to actually start linking much more concentrated activities that are able to create a closed economic circle. And finally, something that technology allows us is get the street again. You all know the business incubators, right? Which is usually a building where startups get in, right? You can do that on the street. Get a whole street, because technology allows you to break down all the requirements. Security can go via IP. Telecoms go via IP as well. So all the things that were usually linked to a single building, a single location, can be broken down, so you can actually recover a whole street in order to get an incubator. So in a very, very nutshell, so a city can city can create a platform model, create a new model that allows retail to be much more agile in that sense. Allow us to upgrade the history. There is no problem on having a certain amount of history on the city centers, but city centers need to evolve, else you will get a fantastic museum which is lifeless. Understand that the space is not static. Cities are not a postcard any longer. Cities are actually a dynamic element. Allow retail to be that dynamic element as well. Create a citizen experience. Learn from retail. Cities need to learn from retail to create a citizen experience. Especially nowadays, what will make London retail very different from retail in Barcelona? And allow for flexibility and that physical platform. So that was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Iñaki. Do we have any questions that people would like to ask? We've got a roving microphone around here. One of the things I'd like to ask you is that last year I was doing the Smart City Forum in Barcelona, and they're talking about the difficulty of getting buy-in from the councils. Obviously, when you've got a whole city on board, it must be much easier. But if you're trying to make that a smaller town, we have the shutter problem syndrome a lot in the UK. How do you think that's going to work?
In which sense, sorry?
So how easy is it to get buy-in in smaller towns from the council and the people who run them?
It's actually easier than what you expect, because the problem is much starker in that sense. Because large cities, and it's significant in London, what you can see in smaller boroughs, where street life is being drained out, and that is almost getting into an emergency case rather than something that has to be left apart somehow. So it's much easier to get to those smaller councils than on a large city level, actually.
Interesting.